Welcome to Things That Matter, featuring Farm to Market, caring for kids, and age-reversing health. It's all coming right up on Things That Matter. Now, please welcome your host, Carl Krebs.
Good evening, good afternoon from our studio at Things That Matter. Welcome to our broadcast. If you'll hang with us for 90 minutes, we're pretty sure we're going to talk about some things that matter to you too. We want to talk about those things. We want to talk about three different segments here. Our Farm to Market, where we're going to be talking about the developing situation at the port in Vancouver, which is going to obviously play havoc with our producers this fall. We're going to move into our second segment after 30 minutes of caring for kids. This gets really interesting as we update you on the situation in a secondary school in Morden, Manitoba, speaking with a concerned parent. And we're going to be talking about letters of notification, in fact, parental consent forms and what they do. And our third segment is with our veteran health consultant, Judy Friesen, on age reversing health. What's the difference between anti-aging and reverse aging? We're going to talk about that in the third segment. But right now, here's a message from LifeWave.
Imagine having no pain, sleeping through the night, having more energy, and reversing the aging process. Now imagine LifeWave doing that all naturally, without the use of harmful drugs. X39 is the most advanced patented light therapy in the world. LightWave is a simple wearable patch that you place in your body that stimulates the body to regenerate and heal itself. With more than 20 years of research and over 100 patents, LifeWave specializes in age-reversing all-natural health. Find out what the power of the patch can do for you. For more information or to join our LifeWave community, go to thingsthatmatter.ca/LifeWave. LifeWave, reversing the aging process naturally without the use of harmful drugs. Welcome to Farm to Market, featuring an in-depth look at how the Canadian ag industry and Canadian farmers alike are faced with a variety of challenges in an ever-changing liberal Canadian agricultural landscape. Now, here's your hosts, Carl Krebs and Harry Siemens.
Well, welcome back. I have Harry Siemens standing by with me. But before we get into Farm to Market, allow me to talk about something else is a thing that matters. You might have caught the news just a day or two that our famous Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, survived a non-confidence vote in the House of Commons. How is that possible with a popularity rating of 28%? It's interesting to know that after his election in 2016, he had a top 5 popularity rating. He is now in the top 5 of the most unpopular prime ministers of Canada. You know the answer to that. The Bloc Québécois and Jagmeet Singh are in bed with the Liberals. I say this now. How are you NDP voters and other voters out there able to differentiate between a party like the Liberals and the NDP? Jagmeet Singh has made a deal with Trudeau, the likes of which we'll probably never know. But he continues to bring up and prop up this Liberal government. What can we say about that? Well, Harry, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, we're doing okay. You bet. It's a beautiful, beautiful day, as you know, in southern Manitoba. A little bit windy, but at the same time, we're doing great.
Excellent, excellent. So you got a number of things on the agenda tonight. And the first one I think we want to talk about is the disaster that I think is looming in the West Coast, in the docks of Vancouver. And this is an article that you wrote in the Winnipeg Sun. And as a lot of people now know, the Winnipeg Sun is under new management, under new ownership, and we're seeing some really good reporting. So I'm proud to say and glad to know that you're a part of the regular writing there. But take us through this article, Harry.
Well, first off, it's great to see what the Winnipeg Sun is doing, and I've had the privilege now. I think every week I'll have an article, a column in it. But right now, the latest, Wade Sapkovich is the executive director of the Western Canadian Grain Elevators Association that has the 6 companies that the employees that the union represents at the West Coast port. They are striking against, of course, their employers. And so Wade told me around lunchtime, he says the terminals are limping along with management operating at a fraction of throughput capacity. The entire conveyor belt from Prairie Elevator to vessel loading has slowed down. And I'm hoping I'm wrong. And in this case, I'll gladly admit it, but it looks like we have a catastrophe that could be developing. And when I say catastrophe, meaning that at this point, as Wade told me in an earlier interview, that the union has the lever. Why? They were watching the clock better. They timed their walkout just absolutely at the worst time for farmers and at the best time for grabbing leverage. And as he told me, he says, they've got the lever. He says they're going to come after just about everything, and they may come after for everything that they want. And, and at the same time, as Wade told me, he says, the more it costs to ship grain, the less the farmers get. And the other thing he said, people will say, well, what's a week here and what's a week there? And he used the example that if they strike for a week, well, people say, well, you can haul it the next week. No, something else was going to be hauled the next week. And so obviously we get behind. We get all kinds of dollar figures that we see, 35, 40, 50 million dollars, much more than that in some cases, of what a strike like this costs. And the biggest cost, or there's several costs other than dollar value, is the reputation. And we've talked about that before. And Wade, again, was the one that told me. He says there are, and he kind of used it tongue-in-cheek maybe, but there are countries that are starting to look at Canada's transportation system as a banana belt. And why is that? Because, so they see, 52% of all the grain moves through that port. And at the same time, people are waiting for it. And there are other places. And he says the other thing about when the Australian harvest starts to come off, I believe it's in the new year. He says if we're not set up before that, he says then all of a sudden the Australian harvest comes in and starts to fill in for some of the customers for some of the grain that they had hoped to get from Canada. So right now, commodity prices have been so-so, down considerably from a year ago. And so farmers need all, and again, people will say, oh yeah, well, you're just talking about the rich farmers. That's not what I'm talking about. I says, when you're putting in a crop in spring and it costs you $500-600 an acre to put in that crop before you even have any idea whether, number one, you're going to have a crop, number two, whether you're going to be able to sell it, and what will you sell it for. And so the prices went up a couple of years back, the commodity prices, along with that went the input costs. So right now, that's the challenge. Farm storage, we're probably about 80% done with cereal harvest in Manitoba and about 50% done with canola. And we got a huge crop coming off. The cereals are really good. I've been hearing some things. So, I just
and you know what? You can have all those great crops come off, but if you have no effective cost efficient way to move it, then you've got a big problem. And it was only a few weeks ago when the railroads, both of them, I don't know how far back you have to go to find that both railroads in our country, both railway systems are on strike at the same time. And here we're now followed with a port strike, of which you said 52% moves our grain out to the other countries. I think your title on this really speaks to the high cost that Canada is going to be seen to be unreliable because we have poor leadership in this country that will not take ownership and see what they need to see before it's a disaster. And this is the problem here. So you get this situation developing, and here he is. Justin Trudeau survives a non-confidence vote. The fact is, the country has no faith in the prime minister of this country. Other countries are not going to have any more faith than we do. Fair to say?
Well, you're absolutely right, and we don't even hear anything from the federal government. I mean, we have the union and the organization representing the companies. They met briefly, but they're really not going anywhere with their negotiations unless they've done something in the last couple of hours. But I've been staying on top of it with Wade Supkovich, and he's been very, very good at giving me the lowdown. And he doesn't beat around the bush. He tells me as it is. And so, just taking it the next step, I'm going to talk about the food professor, Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. I had a chance to interview him this morning, and we talked about some other things. But first off, I want to talk to him about what he said about the strike. He said for 3-4 years, like he says, really, and he's the food professor. He keeps a real good eye on what's happening to the food industry, right? You've seen him on Twitter and so forth. And so he says, eventually we're not going to have a very good system if somewhere along the line it doesn't become an essential service. Whether that's the way to go, I'm not sure. But at the same time, it sure seems like, because since 2010, I believe we've had 16 work stoppages in Western Canada regarding agricultural products. And so that does obviously hurt. But the other thing he says, October the 1st, we got another vote coming, and that's the longshoremen. There's 45,000 workers all the way along the east coast of North America. He says, if they go on strike, everything stops. So we've got some real challenges, Carl. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get some of these things resolved. The other thing that the food professor talked about, and people don't even know about it for the simple reason it's been kept quiet. It's Bill C-293, which has gone through Parliament. It's for a couple of readings at the Senate. And here's what he said about this one. It's when the state dictates our diet, it's less about nourishment, culture, and taste, but more about obedience and control. And this is the bill that's concerning due to its implications for the livestock sector. The bill's vague language could grant the federal government significant power to reshape how the livestock industry operates, potentially leading to shifts in consumer diets towards the alternative proteins. It's the bill that's supposed to have us ready when we have another pandemic. And so at the same time, he said, he says it's really interesting. He says what really worried him in that bill is that they're going to suggest that, because animal agriculture is so dangerous and maybe passing on some of the virus, whatever. And he says, what was in that bill, what really concerned him the most is that they want us to go to plant protein, other protein than animal food. And so, we've got some real challenges, and there's a few other bills, but like he says, it's really a concern when the government can start legislating. And he says there was really no talk about it. It just sailed through. And now all of a sudden, and like he said, all of a sudden it was brought to his attention. And now he's starting to talk about it and others are noticing it. But it could be a real challenge as well.
Yeah, no doubt whatsoever there. I lost you for a second there. Did you share the food professor's quote on Twitter about the
You
compliance?
lost? Yeah, I said.
Yeah, I lost you broadcast.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
When the state dictates our diet, it's less about nourishment, culture, and taste, but more about obedience and control. And that's the bill. As I can repeat it. That's the bill that is supposed to get governments and people ready for another pandemic, right? That's
right.
And there has been, and it sailed through the House of Commons. Nobody really had any things to say about it. And at the same time, the other part of that bill, as I mentioned, was the fact that they want us to go away from animal agriculture, easier to control what's going on, and they want to replace it with plant protein. They call it alternative protein. Well, what's the alternative to animal protein? Is plant protein. And I'm not here to put down the plant protein, but if we're going to take away animal protein, it's going to be again.
Well, it's even worse than that, Harry. It's even worse than that. We're talking about bugs. I was recently watching an episode of one of the talk shows. I won't even mention her name because she so annoys me. And she brought on this chef who features bugs, how to properly prepare and cook bugs. And I thought, this is the lowest form of entertainment and the least enticing food I can think you'd ever present before me. But protein, as you know, we talked about that a little while ago on the Maple Leaf situation, as they are making changes in their processing to add protein, and they have been a little bit non-specific about that. So it's anybody's guess. And we need to return to that story, I guess, maybe follow it up if we pick up anything on it. But what else is happening out there in our world that's affecting our food and our prices and our quality of food?
Well, I did an interview with John Paul Gervais. He's the vice president for economics with the Federal Credit Corporation. And I've known we call him JP. I've known JP for quite a few years, interviewed him over the times. He was in Winnipeg speaking to several meetings, and I didn't get a chance because of a funeral, but I had a chance to visit with him one-on-one. And his biggest, or one of the bigger concerns that he had, is the lack of productivity. We're as far as farmers are concerned, and he wasn't blaming farmers, but he says, you want the farmers to do with less, and it just like he says, we've picked off all the high fruits, or the low hanging fruits. We've picked
the low hanging fruit, yeah.
Now we've got to move ahead and see if we can't get that productivity to come up or go bigger, but they want us to do it with less. And so in his case, and the other thing we talked about was the innovation, and you and I have talked about that. That farm, there's, like, I asked him, I says, how many farmers, excuse me, actually use the innovation that's out there? I mean, I know a lot of them do. But he says no, we don't see it being used to the extent that we may think it is, and so again, it has to do with the low hanging fruit and so forth, and at this point, he talks about the productivity, and even in the hog business, he wasn't terribly optimistic about the hog business, and because over the last 55 years, we have not seen a return on investment on the facilities of the hog industry in Western Canada.
That is to say that the costs of staying in the business and upgrading according to legislation, according to whatever rules that pertain to the industry, that is outstripped by the return. So the farmers are having to invest disproportionately into their equipment, buildings, and whatnot, and the return isn't there. Like, again, it's almost a bad business model if you looked at it on the analytics of return on investment, it isn't there.
Absolutely. I don't say the same for the grain. I'm now talking about hog facilities because you're looking at building a hog barn for $5 million. The other thing that's not happening in the hog industry, we don't have the people. Like I talked to Rick Briget, who's the chairman. He's a hog producer from Notre Dame, and he's the chairman of Manitoba Pork Council. And he says, he would have guys who would like to build barns, but they don't know if anybody will work in those barns. And so, and so we're seeing that as well. So productivity is a key, but at the same time, return on investment needs to happen as well. But right now, we're not seeing that happen across the board.
Well, and we're talking about a number of things. There are a number of issues at play. We've been talking about this now from one show to the next. We keep rolling from one potential disaster to the next, and these storms are all on the horizon. It seems that we are in a very unstable business environment. I wonder what the producers, when they sit around and talk with each other, actually have to say to each other to encourage each other. But some of it is the longevity and the history and the pride, the fact that these farms have been in the hands of families for decades, from generation to generation. But we talked about this, I think, on the last show. The transition plan from the farmer father to the farmer son. But in some ways, you look at this all and you say, it seems so unstable. And Harry, you've been in it a long time. Have you ever seen it in this sort of environment where it just seems to be, you seem to be jumping from one log to the next, trying not to fall in the water?
Well, you're absolutely right. But again, there are a lot of the farmers, especially the bigger farmers, and of course the smaller farmers that continue to do well because they're the ones that are the food producers. They're the ones that are putting the food on. They would like to put the food on the vessels going out to the different countries that need that food as well. And so, it's been interesting. I always keep looking at it from a perspective and say, I wonder what my father would be doing. He was farming till 1984, and he was a great farmer. But at the same time, my brother has continued on. But my brother chose not to go big. They chose to do with what they had, and it didn't matter to him how big or how small they were, as long as they can make a great living, and they did. He never paid. And here's the other thing: he never paid more, I believe, if I'm right, more than $1,000 an acre for land. And who knows? He may still have that 2% line, loan at the FCC that I just talked about before, because that was what really helped a lot of farmers at that time. And that's why I have a lot of respect for John Paul Gervais, because I know my brother-in-laws, they took out a loan from FCC so they could buy out their father. My brother did the same, and they were just there working on behalf. And that's the other thing he said. He says we really need to be working together with banks, with suppliers, and with farmers so that we can move forward in those kinds of things.
Do you think right now, Harry, in your opinion, after surveying the industry and participating and reporting on it as long as you have, that a lot of farmers are worse off financially, and don't judge it by what you see? I move very, very expensive equipment daily. Tomorrow, I will likely pick up something that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it'll only be an implement. It'll only be an attachment to a $1.8 million combine. But looks can be deceiving. My question is, how well off is the farmer today? Because, you look at amortization periods in the residential market. People are stretched thin. Farmers can look like they're dripping with money, but then they need that equipment, and in some cases are forced to spend that money. And where is it going? On the operating line. It's not cash where you just write a check and you're not paying interest on it. What's your assessment of that condition right now? What's the financial situation? Do you have any insights there?
Well, I would say that we used to be able to say, well, we'll just wait till next year. you don't hear that anymore. You know, a lot of farmers don't want to wait till next year to, because next year is going to be a lot tougher if they don't have a crop or the prices are low. So the overhead costs, the operating costs are tough. But at the same time, if you want to get out of farming, it's pretty easy. You just need to name a price, and that's where the farmer is getting, his payback is selling land. I mean, as I said before, my brother hasn't bought anything more than maybe $1,000 to $1,500 an acre. But I do believe there's probably two colonies that are waiting for him to finally retire. And I'm not sure whether it'll be this year or next year because he's going to be 87 years old. But he knows that if he retires, but they're waiting there to buy. So that part is good. It's the younger farmers that are highly leveraged and buying those pieces or renting, leasing, whatever it may be, those pieces of equipment that are costing the combine is $1 million and the tractor is $1 million plus and so forth.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
seeders,
The one thing I can say, and I have the utmost respect for Hutterites, I've known many of them, I have some Hutterite friends, is that it's a different working model than what you would have on the ordinary farm because in the way that people habitate together, this is a communal effort. The colony does everything together. Nobody's being paid per se in the colony to do what they do. So in some ways they have that advantage, but you look at the farmer and unless he has enough help of his own, again, in the form of family, I'm sure your father didn't pay you much if he paid you anything to work on the farm. He probably said, if you've got your feet under the table, welcome to the workshop, and here you go.
yeah.
But in this case, it's different with the it's going to be different with an independent farmer versus a large sprawling Hutterite operation. Do you see the difference there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But we also have the bigger farmers that, with the 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 acres and more. And so,
Yes.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I don't want to come off and say, well, all the farmers are in bad shape because they're not. We got some really good farmers that are doing everything possible to continue to feed the world, but we also have those that are struggling for the simple reason that it's tough when you don't have a crop. And now, of course, just to wrap up on the strike issue,
Yes.
like that's a real challenging and again, farmers really have to, they have to really be strong, but it isn't that easy to be strong. We have the farmer wellness program, where people can, where there's a line where people can call because the suicide levels and the mental health issues amongst farmers are really high. And so it's sometimes tough to, when they see these 3, 4 pieces of equipment sitting on the yard and waiting to harvest or whatever, and to come and admit to somebody that I'm really going through a difficult struggle because the whole aspect of putting in the crop and then looking after that crop and wondering, like this year has been so up and down. We had that rain event in July and then we had a rain event later and so forth. And yet the crop is coming off and they have to take it off. You can't wait till tomorrow if it's ready today. So you gotta be going. So again, my heart is always with the farmers, with the agricultural people, and I'm not sure if we're getting ready to the end. Maybe you have another question.
Well, we got a couple more minutes, but I want to talk about the mental health issue here because we've heard from other people, and a friend of ours that we know, I think, in the funeral business talks about the uptick in suicide and so forth. And I remember you mentioning a few episodes, a book that was written called The Recovering Farmer. And I think this is one man's pouring out of his heart of how difficult it was for him to get back to ground zero, to somewhere where he could start again. I don't know the book. I haven't read it, but you can make a few comments on it in the closing 5 minutes that we have here, Harry.
And that his name is Jerry Friesen, and he was a hog producer. He was actually the chairman of the Manitoba Hog Marketing Board at one point. I know him really well. He's from Wawanesa. and he went through real difficult struggles. And it was finally when he was able to, somebody was out there that he could reach out to, that he realized how bad of shape he was really in. So he wrote this book, The Recovering Farmer, and it's an organization that's called the Manitoba Farm Wellness Association, where people can call, with absolute security that nobody is going to be watching, listening to what you're saying. They can actually call and find a counselor, that not just any counselor, but a counselor that is trained and ready to listen to the concerns that farmers really have. And my hat's off to Jerry Friesen, because he did an amazing job with the book. He's all over the place. He's promoting.
Talking about the book now.
Pardon me?
Talking about the book. He's all over the place
that's
talking
right,
about the book.
Recovering Farmer.
And you know what, Harry? I want to say something here, because this is the first time it's dawned on me that when we talk about industries, we talk about the business side of it, we talk about the costs of operations and yields and pricing and all that stuff. And we dedicated most of the show, as we do, to, how does this all work together? We forget that behind every farmer is a real person, heart, soul, body, and they feel what we feel, but only in a different way as they look at their land. And I mean, farmers are unique in that way, because in many ways they are in their business by themselves, mostly. Some businesses you're in business but not by yourself. This is one where it's truly dependent on you and the good Lord provision of whether that works, and a prime minister that doesn't screw up the country too badly, and some of those things are just outside of his control. So I can see the emotional toll that it takes on these producers.
You're absolutely right. And not only that, but there are people that are saying, well, you're not doing this for the environment. You're treating your animals bad. You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong. And so my hat's off today. And my final comments here is that, if you are a farmer listening here today, watching this, my hat off to you, my prayers for you, for the simple reason that you are the food producers of the world. We have the best right here in Manitoba, Western Canada, all of Canada, and so forth. And so hats off to you. May God bless you. Keep working. And if you got a problem, make sure you get a hold of someone that will listen to you, so that you're not working and doing this all by yourself. And that's Seaman Says.
Well, Harry, I want to thank you again for your showing up here every week, expressing your heart, sharing your heart based on where you come from. You are a kid from the farm. Your father was a farmer, and your heart is with the farmers. And I have to say, you know what? Our farmers are so important to the overall GDP of our country, but more importantly, that we have a food source here. So I'm with you, my friend. And you know what? By the way, I know the other side of you, the pastoral side, and I'm quite certain, knowing your heart, that these guys could call you as well. So God bless you for what you do in ministering to people as well. Thank you so much, Harry, for being with us. Look forward to having you back next week.
Okay, we'll talk to you then.
You betcha. Well, folks, that was Farm to Market with Harry Seamans, and we're going to move into our next segue here. But before we do that, and that's caring for kids, before we do that, here's a word from LifeWave.
Imagine having no pain, sleeping through the night, having more energy, and reversing the aging process. Now imagine LifeWave doing that all naturally, without the use of harmful drugs. X39 is the most advanced patented light therapy in the world. LightWave is a simple wearable patch that you place on your body that stimulates the body to regenerate and heal itself. With more than 20 years of research and over 100 patents, LifeWave specializes in age-reversing all-natural health. Find out what the power of the patch can do for you. For more information or to join our LifeWave community, go to thingsthatmatter.ca/LifeWave. LifeWave, reversing the aging process naturally without the use of harmful drugs.